Okay. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Thank you for coming to this class. I will have the chance and the opportunity to talk a bit about emotional wounds and our anarthas and how these two things connect together. I'm a devotee, but in my material life, so to say, in my everyday life, I work as a psychologist. And this is a very crucial topic for me to dive into the inner world, to see how our thoughts, behaviors, emotions, emotional wounds impact our devotional life and how they interconnect with our spiritual journey and our journey as sadhakas. So in this lecture, I will try to present some ideas which I found useful, and I think that they could be of help to have one more perspective about these unwanted behaviors and things in ourselves, our misplaced values, as our acharyas say about the anarthas. And we will have a bit of an analysis how these emotional wounds connect to our anarthas. We all know and feel that our inner world is a very, very complex thing, and our present personality, our material sense of self is constructed during lifetimes from time without beginning. And most of us carry uncountable wounds from also this lifetime, but from the previous lifetimes. And our character, material identity consists of a mixture of these tendencies. And they, in a way, imprison us in a labyrinth of obstacles in our spiritual journey. And I will try to shed a bit light on how this labyrinth can be, how we can go through it with a different approach to our anarthas. Because we know as sadhakas, on the first stages on our devotional path, our main goal is to reach the stage of nishta, this steady, enthusiastic devotional life, to have a steady practice. But first, to go there, we need to go through what is known as the stage of unsteady practice, this anishtita bhajana kriya. And if we consider our material consciousness as a lake, then in these initial stages, when you start to practice more, it is like a steering of these waters, and we kind of disturb these ancient layers of mud and slit, and everything starts to come up. And then some of these anartha starts to show, and we need to face them if we want to go through. And what does the word anartha mean? Our contemporary acharyas give the definition of anartha in a very concrete way. Anarthas is our misplaced values and useless habits developing out of our misplaced values. So by nature, we as human beings, we assign value and give energy to the things as well as to the models of thinking and behavior. We cannot end this. We are always in this process of giving meaning, assigning meaning. And in the context of our material identity, we give this value and meaning to material things, and this make our material identity bigger. There is nothing wrong with the assigning of value and meaning, but it is a way we need to see how exactly and at what we give value and give our energy to. And Anarthas can be gross things such as seeking material enjoyment, addictions to substances, addiction to power, to prestige, to possessions, or subtle ones such as misconceptions, offenses, criticism, prejudice, fear, anger, and fanatism. And to set a bit also some Shastric definitions, I will I will say a bit about the categories which Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives in his Bhajana Rahasya. He makes he divides them in four groups, our anarthas. First, illusion about spiritual knowledge, misconceptions of one's true self and the supreme, misconceptions of the goal of life and the means to attain it, misconceptions of that which is antithetical. Second, desire for illusory ends, material enjoyment, supernatural powers, and liberation from birth and death. We want and we desire things that are illusionary. Third, weakness of heart. In these anarthas, we attach to things unrelated to Krishna and his service, like duplicity, envy, desire for name and fame. And the fourth are different kind of offenses, aparadas, offenses against the holy name, offenses made during service and worship, offenses against the Vaishnavas, the holy Dhamma, to the other living beings and souls. And as sadhakas, it's normal we want to get to rid ourselves of such wrongdoings. And these anarthas could easily be considered as our enemies. And if we take this approach, what we do with our enemies? We try to fight them or escape from them if we see them as more powerful. And these are the two main reactions of the stress responses conditioned by our body and nervous system. Fight and flight, this is the stress response. And when we try to fight our anarthas, we attack them with all the willpower that we have. Then we try to flee from them if we see that our fight is unsuccessful. And the flee response is kind of again still fighting with them, but in a passive way, through ignoring, suppressing, and escaping. And it's quite common as a consequence of either fight or flight to end up experiencing stress, exhaustion, burnout, anger, or this anger we can put it towards us, to point it towards us in this aggression, guilt, shame, lack of enthusiasm, apathy, or combination of these all. And what I would like to say with this, if we have attempted to deal with our anarthas and haven't been successful up until now, but rather ended up with the aforementioned consequences, it could be beneficial for us to change our perspective of the anarthas themselves, and to kind of stop considering them as our enemies. This is also recommended by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. We all know when Krishna warns Arjuna that it is disadvantageous to see anything in this world as an enemy. Such mindset is a sign of our dualistic mentality and our material ego, which constantly divides our material mind, which divides everything in the world into mine and not mine, into good and bad. And if we have struggled and we see that have this enemy perspective towards anarthas or some kind of unwanted behavior, model of thinking, feeling, behaving, maybe we could try and be curious and with curiosity to try to implement this different approach and to see what will happen. Maybe we can gain some inner wisdom or some hint what to do what step to take that could be more beneficial. And a different approach to our anarthas also is given by our acharyas. And I have heard that our Guru Maharaj, Prar Maharaj, said that we should put our anarthas on our altar and worship them. And sometimes this might sound a bit odd or a bit paradoxical, but I perceive it as a way to approach them in a specific manner, to see that our anarthas could be quite beneficial for us, and in a way that they sometimes represent this fearful place in which we don't want to go, or we feel shame, guilt that this is still in our world, in our everyday life. And in a way, here I was reminded of this saying that the cave you fear entering holds the treasure you are seeking. And the treasures that could be in our anarthas might be new insights, level of depth, surrender, sincerity, humility, kindness, compassion. Because we will see, and I will try to present this, that in our anarthas we have different, different, different layers beyond them. And but first, from this change of perspective, arises a totally different process of clearing our anarthas. Instead of fighting with them and trying to mentally wrestle and dominate them into submission, we can develop a non-violent approach where we overcome our anarthas by accepting them as messengers and parts of ourselves that need our care. And in my own way, this last 6 years that I've been also practicing as a psychologist and trying to be a sadhaka and try to live up to this high ideal, I find it useful that this non-violent approach really can give some, that we can gain some benefit from it. And if we try to look at these misbehaving and misplaced values as messengers and parts of ourselves that need our care, we learn to see them as manifestations of the material nature in need of compassion. We realize that we shouldn't find the material energy, but show her respect as it is the energy of Krishna and use it in his service. And yeah, it's very hard sometimes, and this fundamental knowledge is easily forgotten when we see our struggles and when it comes to our own personal material nature. It's sometimes hard to have this compassion and to have this approach. But how our anarthas can assist us? Our anarthas, rather than something needing to be hidden away, are like beacons, like treadmills that can lead us to places inside of us which have been hurt and could be also still hurting. They can lead us to the stored trauma in our subtle and physical body, created by our painful experiences in this material world. And beneath the anarthas are our emotions and feelings. If we continue to dig deeper, we find our needs and values, not only material ones, but spiritual needs and values as well. Anarthas are like a coping mechanism from a modern day psychological perspective. We can see them really like coping and defense mechanisms who have also compensatory function. This means that they are not some error or whim, but an important part of our built-in safety or survival system. That is why fighting them sometimes doesn't work. We need to take care of our needs, which may have been affected by trauma or negative experience leading to psycho-emotional wounds. And why I say that these needs that can be discovered under our Anarthas when we look deeper are not only material but also spiritual needs, because our needs like security, connection, positive self-esteem can be also the doors which motivate us to go deeper into our own process. And as sadhakas, wanting to have this surrender, sharanagati, uh, the, the limbs of surrender give satisfaction and fulfillment to these basic needs. The need for connection, we know that we are connected to Krishna, like we are this soul which is connected to the Supreme. We have our need for security also fulfilled. Krishna is our maintainer, our protector. And when we go down and see the anarthas, then we go to the emotion and feelings, and we process our emotions. We go to these needs and values, and um, rediscovering them, reconnecting to the needs inside, we can then try to fulfill them, to satisfy them in a healthy for our devotional life manner, healthy way. And why our emotional wounds and trauma is important. In the psychological literature, trauma is mainly defined as the response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms the individual's ability to cope, which causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes their sense of self and their ability to feel a full range of emotions and experiences. This is like the basic definition of trauma. And despite that traumatic events could be of a different kind, as a result from them, people go through five main inner experiences as a result from the different traumatic events that we could experience. These five inner experiences are rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice, all of which could be experienced independently, or we could experience a combination of them. And why I present these five types of experiences? Because in my counseling practice, I mainly use these theories which are based on body psychotherapy, schema therapy, which is a branch of cognitive behavioral therapy, and some other schools which mainly focus on, they define the traumatic experiences and the consequence of them mainly in these five categories, and I have found them very useful also in my personal practice also as a counseling psychologist. And I see that at the end, really it comes down to five of these inner traumatic emotional wounds: humiliation, injustice, betrayal, rejection, abandonment, and we will go deeper into them now. Mm, But first, why there is this connection, emotional wounds and our anarthas? We saw that traumatic experiences, emotional wounding, can cause this diminishing of self. And we have seen in our practice for sure that we have the theoretical knowledge. We want to do the things correctly. we want to behave in a healthy for our sadhana way, but something happens, something triggers us, and we kind of shift identities. We go back again in this material conditioning, and we can act out of a character, out of our sadhaka ideal. Like totally, we go in some, we regress in a different stage of identity, of identifications. And our wounds, emotional wounds, trauma experiences, they're like deep samskaras in which our energy flows. It's like the bend of the river, this deep, painful sanskaras from this lifetime, from previous lifetimes. And when something triggers this path, it's easily changing our way, our whole energy, mind, emotions, feelings, thoughts, everything goes in that direction. And we enter in this old identity. Like, for example, I can be 30, 50 years old, but if some person disrespects me or kind of criticize me, I can regress back in my young boy identity and feel and think in that way and act in this way. And like all my bhakti aspirations and me wanting to be humble, it's totally shift and I'm like transported back, teleported in this identity with the whole package, my behavior, thinking, feeling. That's why it's important to see these behaviors, these inappropriate behaviors, wrongdoings, and see what kind of emotional background is there deeper, and then go to this deep down emotional wound that maybe is the core of which at the end everything comes up uh, in this way, presenting itself in this model of behaving, feeling, and thinking, which is not appropriate for my practice. So we are like a minefield of layers of material conditioning. And when something steps on this mine, we explode and we regress in these frozen in time material identities. And it's like full blown in real time, it comes again. And now I will go through the 5 main emotional wounds and to see what are they and what kind of anarthas can come from them. And in this way, my humble desire or intention is to give some ideas to reflect on and try to see, to understand better what we are doing, maybe some things with which we are struggling, or to be able to see the struggle of others in a more compassionate way, not only that this or that person is full of anarthas, but to be able to see beyond this and to see deeper and to try to connect with compassion to his emotional wounds, to see the emotional wound, which sparks in us a desire to connect and to respond in a more compassionate way. So the first emotional wound, rejection. Rejection means to dismiss a person as inadequate, unacceptable, or faulty. And rejection is a very deep trauma because the one who suffers from it feels rejected in his very being, and above all, in his right to exist. It's like I'm denied the possibility to live because I'm rejected. And when it's really deep this wound, I can feel that I don't deserve. I don't deserve to express, to live, because I'm kind of defective in a way. And if people have such dominant trauma, they may be isolating themselves from others unconsciously to protect themselves from their rejection. Because if I think that I'm inadequate, if I see that I'm as a person wrong, like something is not okay with me, it's normal to isolate, to don't have the strength or the desire to show up. And a person with this emotional wound may subconsciously, deeply be convicted that that he will be rejected because he is flawed and not good enough. And people with this emotional wound, they feel there is something wrong with them and that they don't deserve to be loved. Deep down, they believe that people will hurt, criticize, or deprive them of attention, love, friendship. And this can result in a strong distrust of themselves and others. And this inner dynamic can lead to coping mechanisms in the form of uh, dissociation from our experiences, feelings, body, mind, dissociate from the environment, withdrawal, this attitude that we want to withdraw, emotional unavailability, social isolation, mistrust, escapist mentality. And people with such a psycho-emotional wound are prone to conditions such as depressions. They can be more melancholic. They can have more feelings of apathy, frustration, sometimes in the um, severe severe types of this state. We can have paranoia. We could have also some impulses for self-harm, substance abuse, addictions of any kind. And in our spiritual life, the deep wound of rejection can manifest as difficulty in keeping close relationships with devotees, feeling fear that other devotees will see how faulty we are. And we can project this fear of being rejected towards others, towards our spiritual master and Krishna himself. And all of this can cause our hearts to close, which could lead to seeking moksha rather than developing a loving service relationship. Um, Even to the point of setting sights on Brahman rather than Bhagavan. Because we have heard is that some people they can be so frustrated with material experiences of relationships with human interaction that they are frightened to project this ideal, project this situation, this circumstance to the ideal of the divine, because we are so fed up, so hurt by these relationships, and we want only to disconnect, not to connect again to some relationship, because we project our material experience. And that way, with this wound of rejection, we can be more trying to dissociate, and it could be hard for us to make these loving relationships hard um, to live on this platform of the heart and feelings, but we are more on the mental platform because it's hard for us to trust, to surrender, to show sincerely and openly, to show ourselves. And also with this wound, we could hide some aspects of ourselves. so completely that it even becomes hard for ourselves, for us to see and feel what is inside of ourselves. It can become hard for us. And this dissociation and suppression can lead to superficiality, to be more superficial in our practice, and we could try to live up to an image of ourselves which is far from reality. Because with this dissociation and trying to cut also the ties, emotional bonds, we are not able to receive feedback, we are not able to connect also with our needs. So this is so these things are kind of the main anarthas and behaviors, feelings, and thoughts that could be some impairment, some difficulty on our spiritual path when we have this emotional wound. The second wound is abandonment, and abandonment is to live without intending to return. To be abandoned suggests that the person who was left may be helpless without protection. Um, we can imagine a child which is abandoned by his parents. He's totally unprotected, totally helpless. And in our material life and material lives from before, for sure we had many such occasions in which we were abandoned. And this trauma can manifest through loss or separation from a caregiver or a loved one. And many people who have such a psycho-emotional wound have problems with autonomy, to be autonomous, to feel that they have strength. This feeling of self-agency can be disrupted. And people with an abandonment wound feel helpless, insecure, vulnerable, hesitant. They are prone to codependency. They could have a strong fear of loneliness and failure. And in the severe forms of this wound, we can experience irrational fears or fears of illness, of catastrophes, accidents. Um, it could be the basis for my background in some counseling. I can say that if someone struggles with panic disorder, panic attacks, anxiety attacks, mainly they have this wound of abandonment. Just as a hint, if you have some close to a person who has some struggles with anxiety, mainly this is the deeper source of the anxiety. And also, people with this wound are most prone to victim mentality. They could live their life from this victim position and think that what is happening to them is the fault of everyone else outside, either people, circumstances, fate, God Himself, politicians, but never themselves. And in spiritual life, which is the important part for us, the abandonment wound can manifest as blaming others for not supporting us enough, not caring enough. People can be easily hurt and offended that no one is taking care of their needs when they have this wound. And this can cause attention seeking behaviors that can make the practice again superficial or can evoke feelings of resentment towards devotees and Bhakti herself, because we can feel that we are not given enough. And this dynamic could lead to anarthas such as pointing out the faults of others, blaming, playing the role of a victim. It could be hard for such people to take proper responsibility for their own process, as they expect some authority to take care of them, but not in a surrendered way, but more in a codependent way. So this also here can be a crucial part of the dynamic, this codependent way of acting, and kind of also we can think that we have great surrender, but to be only insecure and very codependent. So yeah, mm, we continue with the third one, humiliation. And what is the definition of humiliation? It is to reduce someone to a lower position in one's own or others' eyes, to make someone ashamed or embarrassed. And mostly when people suffer from this trauma, they can develop tendencies such as approval seeking, people pleasing, subjugation, and self sacrifice, which could sound good, like self sacrifice. But in this case, it is motivated by shame, by guilt, and the child grows up with the feeling that if he's not obedient and well intentioned, he will not be loved. This is mainly the family dynamic. And thus, he learns to suppress and ignore his feelings, emotions, and needs. In mature years, this trauma can manifest in people mostly in a way that they still center their lives around ways to receive the approval of others. But yeah, out of their desire to please others, they neglect their own needs and happiness. They could be always smiling, be very accommodating and ready to serve everyone, as they feel this is their basic duty. But since such self-repressing behavior causes a counter-neglecting reaction in people, people with such tendency resent being ignored and feel that no one thinks or cares about them the way they do for others. For sure, maybe every one of us at some time in some relationship had this feeling that I'm giving so much, but they don't treat me the way I treat them. It's not reciprocal. Reciprocal, yeah. And this brings some frustration in us. Mm, in our spiritual life and community, the humiliation wound can lead people to totally ignore their feelings and needs, which often leads to repressed anger. And this can further lead to outbursts of rage towards others or autoaggression and feelings of shame and guilt. And this inner dynamic can be an impetus to the to do a lot of service or practice in a way to be accepted, appreciated, and approved. And on the surface, this can look like a person who is always ready to do anything and everything, but gradually, if this is motivated by the humiliation wound, it could lead to burnout or resentment. People in general in this wound are not conscious about their radical and sincere about their current needs because they want to be something else in order to deserve the affection and love of others. And when we practice in this self-neglecting way, yeah, we could have some still material needs or something that we desire, but we try to neglect it because we feel guilt, shame, we feel that we must self-sacrifice more. But if this is not integrated, accommodated, sometimes if we take action from this wound inside, it can end up in burnout or really this anger towards ourselves, others, some frustration with the process, or this feeling of burnout that I'm totally out of resources, energy, and this feeling of apathy can come, and we can go down to some tamastic state. And now we go to the fourth wound, betrayal. Betrayal is when someone you trust breaks that trust and by doing something that hurts you. This is mostly the definition of betrayal. Breaking the trust by doing something that hurts us. And the most important concept related to betrayal is fidelity, the opposite of betrayal. Being faithful means keeping our commitments, being loyal and devoted. And when a person suffers from this wound, mm, he can be very controlling, he can exhibit controlling behaviors, impulsivity, mistrust again, insufficient self-control, entitlement, violation of the boundaries of others. And such people may feel very insecure and fragile on the inside, which promotes compensatory feelings such as grandiosity, as the strong need to receive respect from others. Um, and in more severe cases, people are more materialistic and try to be more domineering, self-centered, controlling, seductive, manipulative, can be also very manipulative. In spiritual life, it is hard for such people to have good relationships with others because they're excessively preoccupied with their feelings and are not interested in the feelings and needs of others. They do not allow themselves to open up, to reveal themselves, to connect deeply and authentically because they're afraid of their own weakness, vulnerability, and humanness. They tend to impose themselves, control others, and with such a behavior, we can see how this also can impact the community. And when a person has such a wounding in the community, he can be very authoritarian. If he is a leader, he can have these authoritarian tendencies. And the Anarthas are mainly connected with pride, prestige, power, possessiveness. And also, this makes the practice very superficial. Their main focus is to woo good on the outside rather than being good internally. And at the end, they have low self-control, which leads to problems with impulsivity and also discipline. Because with all these inner conflicts, these feelings of weakness, vulnerability, insecure, and also trying to control, to dominate, we are very unstable. Our mind is totally crazy, very impulsive, and it's hard to keep discipline. And the fifth wound is injustice. Justice is defined as valuing, recognizing, or respecting the rights and merits of everyone. And some we can some synonyms of the word justice are right, impartiality, incorruptibility, and therefore a person who suffers from this wound is one who does not feel valued according to his true worth, who does not feel respected, or who does not feel that he is getting what he deserves. A person can also suffer from injustice when he feels that he receives more than he deserves. This is a specific emotional wound, and many people have it because we live in a very on a material platform in just way, and many people, it's not so equal. And we see that many people have hurt, they're hurting inside from this wound. And people who have this psycho-emotional wound can suffer from unhealthy perfectionism. They can be very with perfectionistic mentality. They can be very rigid, to suffer from rigidity, to be not flexible. They do not receive genuine acceptance. They did not receive genuine acceptance during their childhood, and this is impacting them. Mostly they have received they have been corrected, disciplined, or punished. When a child is not receiving this love, acceptance, unconditional support, but is being more chastised, corrected, this can evolve in a trauma of injustice. Because in a way, these people learn that in order to be worthy of love, they would have to demonstrate restraint, perfection, and strength, because this is what was valued. They were corrected because they needed to be more, they needed to be more resilient, they needed to demonstrate some restraint, and they they were denied the possibility to show weakness, to be vulnerable. And as a result of that, they have established strict rules and principles that they follow invariably and in their lives, to the point of idealism and the development of over morality, which strongly condemns anyone who is not like them and does not live by the same rules. Such tendencies disrupt the flow of empathy, deep acceptance, and the ability to receive tenderness, care, warmth, mercy. When we have such dynamic, or a person with such a dynamic in spiritual life, people with this dynamic can lack understanding and sensitivity towards the bigger picture. Their rigidity can evolve into fanatism and separatist mentality. Only my guru, my philosophy, my God, my way. And people want to be perfect and to live up to their ideal at all costs. But this is not driven by real faith, but rather um, from their perfectionism, from this wounding, not from genuine faith and trust. This perfectionism is motivated by the fear of the inner child, which is still there, still suffers this wound, still feels and believes that I'm not perfect, I will be punished, and I'm unworthy of mercy. And such tendencies can lead to excessive stress, anxiety, burnout, apathy again, because it's totally stressful. We're always mobilized, always trying to push further. We don't want to have any comfort zone in which we could recharge, in which we could gain a bit resources to refresh. No, we must push. We need um, to to stretch ourselves, but in an unhealthy way, driven by this unhealthy perfectionism. And people who have such wound in them, in their lives, they can manifest Anarthas to the struggle to accept differences, possessing critical mentality. Yeah, they can have this struggle to accept that people can be different. It's very hard to accommodate different perspectives, different ideas. Mm, And there is also this critical mentality towards the imperfect, those who are not as strict or disciplined as they themselves are. And for such people, it is hard to accept the unjust nature of mercy and continue to rely more on the walls of karma rather than opening their hearts to trust. Because here we know that mercy is unjust, it comes on everyone, and sometimes this can be a struggle for the ego. We want still to be these perfect practitioners who will gain the right to receive mercy. This is like a battle of the ego who still wants to reach this perfectionist ideal, but as we said, not from a genuine place of trust and surrender and faith, but more in a way of yeah, trying to satisfy, to cure this wound of injustice in ourselves. And these were basically these 5 emotional wounds, which, as I said, in my psychological practice and theories that I find helpful and most accurate are explained. There can be a mixture of the wounds. It's not like only one type. I can have the wound of betrayal and humiliation. Most of us have some of the wounds. Maybe we can have one which is severe wounding, but mostly we have from them all, or at least two. And the idea of sharing this was not to have like new instruments to judge or to judge ourselves, or not also to have some rigid structure in which to try to adjust everything. But I wanted to give this perspective in a way to be more open and more compassionate towards our wrongdoings, not to the point to only to accept and to be passive, but if we have some struggle and we found out that this fighting mentality gives more strength to the behaviors, thoughts, feelings that we want to change because they're not beneficial for our practice, we could be needing some different approach and dive deeper. As we said, we have anarthas in the form of behaviors, thoughts, feelings, attitudes which are not helpful, some attachments. We go deeper, we have feelings and some needs, because every of this wound is cured by connection, by surrender, by security, by feeling that we have worth. And this is given in our spiritual practice, in the nature of loving relationships, in the community, in the sadhu sangha we have. So every one of the wounds is connected to a need, and if we start to try to feed the need on the outside, the anartha will start to fade, and it will be easier to overcome it, because the fuel inside, the thing that is making it arise, is this unsatisfied need. Something in us is hurting, and it needs our compassion. if we go there and do our inner work, processing of the emotions in a healthy way, accepting, nourishing our need, the Anarthas, as we said, it's like a castle from cards, sand castle. When we attend to the fundament, the upper floors will, like, as a consequence, they will fall down. And if you have some questions or some topics that came to your mind, some insight, something that got to you, you can share now or you can write me later. I will be happy to hear from you. And next month I will be giving a second class. Then I will be focusing more how to process these emotional wounds, to go deeper in them, and not only on the theoretical level, but some hints from the psychological perspective, how to try to be more good situated and to calm down these needs, to be more able to give energy to our process, to our Bhakti project. So mostly this was the thing that I wanted to share with you. Thank you for being with me till the end. Sorry for my English. I haven't spoken from a long time. And why I talked about this topic, as I said, I'm working as a psychologist. The last 4 years, I have done like 3,000 sessions with people. I have the blessing to work with some devotees. I'm blessed to work with myself. And this knowledge, this perspective is very helpful in my psychological practice and trying to handle myself also. So that's why I thought that maybe it could be of interest. Thank you for your attention. Vanchakalpatarubhascha kripa sindhubheva patitanam Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. And in Facebook or in the social medias, you can find me, Daniel Troev. If you want to continue the conversation, if you have some thoughts, and like this. Thank you again. Hare Krishna. Namaste, everyone.